Welcome to History Love, where we explore the stories, people, and events that shaped our world. Let's dive into the past and uncover history's most fascinating moments. The Battle of Shiloh, a day of blood and bravery. It was the dawn of April 6, 1862, in the heart of Tennessee. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the dense woods and misty fields near Pittsburg landing on the Tennessee River. Union General Ulysses S. Grant, fresh off his triumphs at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, had set his sights on a new goal, the strategic Memphis and Charleston Railroad. His troops were encamped in what they thought was relative safety, unprepared for the storm that was about to hit. The Confederate strike, April 6, 1862. For weeks, Confederate leaders had been watching Grant's movements from afar. General Albert Sidney Johnston and General P.G.T. Beauregard, commanders of the Confederate forces in the West, knew the Union was getting dangerously close to their supply lines. They needed to act fast and regain lost ground. But Grant's forces were spread thin, and there were few defenses in place. The element of surprise they believed would be their advantage. On the morning of April 6, as the Union soldiers slept or prepared their camp, Johnston's forces, nearly 40,000 strong, struck with devastating force. The Confederates came like a wave crashing onto the Union lines. With little warning, Grant's troops found themselves caught in a fierce battle deep in the woods. The air was thick with gunfire, the clash of steel, and the roar of cannons. It was chaos. Both sides had inexperienced troops, many of whom were seeing their first battle. The Confederates pushed forward, forcing the Union soldiers back, but Grant's men were resilient, holding their ground and making a stand where they could. A mortally wounded leader, the fall of Johnston. The tide of battle seemed to shift back and forth, but fate would deal a cruel blow to the Confederacy that afternoon. General Johnston, the heart and soul of the Confederate effort at Shiloh, was struck by a bullet. Mortally wounded, he fell from his horse and was carried off the battlefield. His death sent shockwaves through his troops, leaving the Confederate command shaken at the most critical moment. Despite the blow to their leadership, the Confederates continued to press the attack, determined to push Grant's forces into retreat. But the Union soldiers, though pushed back, fought valiantly, rallying under the leadership of officers like General William Tecumseh Sherman. The fighting raged on through the afternoon, and the Union forces, despite suffering heavy losses, were not yet ready to give up. The turning tide. Reinforcements arrive. As dusk fell, Grant was on the verge of losing everything. But hope was on the horizon. Reinforcements, led by General Don Carlos Buell, were on their way, marching toward Pittsburg Landing. The Confederates, worn and exhausted from the brutal fighting, began to feel the pressure of the Union reinforcements closing in. That night, Grant, though his army was battered, made a decision that would change the course of the battle: to hold firm and await the fresh troops. The Confederates, having failed to crush the Union completely, were now in a precarious position. The following morning, as the sun rose over the battlefield once more, the Union forces began to regroup and renew their assault. The final day, April 7, 1862. April 7 dawned, and the Union soldiers, though bruised and bloodied, returned to the fight with a renewed sense of purpose. The arrival of Buell's troops turned the tide decisively in the Union's favor. The Confederates, who had once driven the Union forces back, now found themselves on the retreat. Beauregard, now in command of the Confederate forces, tried to rally his troops, but it was too late. The Union had regained its position, and with each passing hour, the Confederates were pushed further back toward Corinth, Mississippi. By the end of the second day, the battle was effectively over. The Union had managed to hold on, reoccupying their camp and pushing the Confederates back into retreat. Though both sides claimed victory, the reality was that the battle had been a costly draw. The Confederacy had failed to break Grant's forces, and the Union, while still standing, had suffered immense losses. The aftermath, a heavy toll. When the dust settled, both armies were left reeling from the devastation. Nearly 10,000 soldiers, Union and Confederate, lay dead, wounded, or missing. The land was scarred, the once peaceful woods turned into a graveyard of blood and broken dreams. Grant had held his ground, but at a cost. Shiloh would be remembered as a turning point in the Civil War. Though the battle had ended in a tactical stalemate, it marked the beginning of a fierce, unrelenting struggle that would last for years to come. And while Grant had been tested to his limits, he would soon be known as the man who could stand firm in the face of chaos, traits that would propel him to great heights in the war. As the Union Army mourned its dead and tended to its wounded, the Battle of Shiloh would be etched into history, a story of bravery, loss, and the high price of victory. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history. If you love this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to History Love. Together, let's keep the love for history alive. See you in the next chapter.